They laughed before she even picked up the rifle. Not quietly. Not subtly. They laughed the way people do when they believe they already know how the story ends. What they didn't know was that she had once calculated wind speed in deserts thousands of miles away, slowed her heartbeat on command, and trusted nothing but precision. And in less than 2 minutes, 10 shots would rewrite everything they thought they understood. She stepped onto the polished concrete floor of the private shooting range like she didn't belong there. The members noticed immediately. Designer jackets, gold watches, easy confidence bought with money. She wore a plain hoodie and calm eyes. When one of the men asked if she needed help adjusting the scope, the group smirked. Someone whispered that the range wasn't a beginner's class. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her name was Lena Carter. Years ago, she had been one of the most disciplined marksmen in an elite military unit. After leaving the service, she chose quiet over recognition. Today, she was only there because an old friend invited her to a private competition sponsored by wealthy investors who treated shooting like a weekend hobby. They assumed she was out of place. They assumed wrong. She picked up the rifle like it was an extension of her hands. No dramatic gestures, no performance, just quiet familiarity. Range officer explained the challenge. 10 targets, different distances, limited time point. One of the members chuckled and said, "This should be interesting." Lena exhaled slowly. The clock started ticking, and for the first time, the room fell completely silent. The first shot surprised them, not because it hit the target, but because it landed exactly where the smallest scoring ring met the center. A clean, controlled impact. No adjustment shot. No hesitation. A few brows lifted. The second and third shots followed with the same steady rhythm. Not rushed, not flashy, just precise. The echo in the room felt different now. It wasn't amusement anymore. It was attention. The wealthiest member of the group, a real estate mogul known for hosting exclusive competitions, crossed his arms. He had been the loudest critic earlier. Now he leaned forward, watching the monitor. Lena's breathing never changed. She tuned out the polished floors, the expensive cologne in the air, the subtle shifting of embarrassed feet behind her. In her mind, distance translated into numbers. Wind became data. The world narrowed to alignment and control. 4, 5, 6. Each shot tightened the grouping. The screen displayed a near-perfect cluster that most seasoned hobbyists spent years trying to achieve. Whispers began. Is she military? Has she done competitions? No one asked her directly. By the 7th shot, the mood in the room had shifted entirely. The same men who had offered unsolicited advice now watched without blinking. Laughter from earlier felt distant, almost unreal. When she paused before the 8th shot, someone cleared their throat nervously. They wanted her to miss. Not out of cruelty, but because perfection from someone they underestimated felt uncomfortable. She didn't miss. The final 2 shots were almost anticlimactic. Both struck within millimeters of the other's. 10 shots. The scoreboard displayed a result none of them had ever seen in person, and suddenly, wealth, status, and assumptions felt very small. The range officer checked the monitor twice, then a third time. He wasn't smiling. He was verifying. Numbers were correct. A perfect technical performance. The mogul who had mocked her earlier walked closer, studying the grouping as if searching for a flaw. He adjusted his glasses. "How long have you been shooting?" he asked, his tone no longer casual. Lena lowered the rifle carefully, placing it back on the bench with the same respect she had shown it from the beginning. "A while," she said simply. Her voice carried no edge, no pride, just truth. The room filled with an unfamiliar energy. Not applause. Not yet. It was the kind of silence that happens when people confront their own bias. One of the younger members finally spoke up. That wasn't luck. She gave him a small nod. They wanted a dramatic story, a moment of bragging. Instead, they got composed, and that unsettled them more than arrogance ever could. The mogul asked if she competed professionally. Another member offered to sponsor her in an upcoming elite tournament. Their offers came quickly now, layered with respect they hadn't shown minutes earlier. Lena looked at the targets one last time. For her, it wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about remembering who she was. Years ago, she had trained in places where mistakes carried consequences far heavier than pride. Compared to that, this room was just noise. But today, she had reminded herself of something important. Skill does not fade because others fail to recognize it, and sometimes, the strongest response to doubt is simple excellence. Word traveled quickly through the private club network. By the end of the week, people who hadn't even been present were talking about the woman who outperformed seasoned members without raising her voice once. Invitations began arriving, not just to compete, but to join, to become part of their circle, to sit at tables she had once been silently excluded from. Her friend asked if she felt vindicated. Lena thought about it carefully. Vindication would have meant she needed their approval. She didn't. What she felt was clarity. At a follow-up event, the same members greeted her differently. Handshakes were firmer. Eye contact lasted longer. Mogul personally introduced her to guests, his tone now proud instead of dismissive. But something subtle had changed in her too. She stood taller. Not because of their respect, but because she had stepped into a space that underestimated her and let her work speak first. During a casual conversation, one member admitted, "We judged you too quickly." She didn't scold him. She didn't lecture. She simply replied, "It happens." Her calm response lingered longer than any criticism could have, because what truly unsettled them was not just her accuracy. It was her restraint. She could have embarrassed them. She could have reminded them of every comment made before she fired a single shot. Instead, she chose dignity, and in doing so, she shifted the culture of that room more effectively than anger ever could. A month later, Lena returned to the same range for another private event. This time, there was no laughter when she walked in. Instead, conversations paused out of respect. New members approached her for advice. Not because she demanded authority, but because she had earned it without asking. One young woman stood near the entrance, clearly intimidated by the atmosphere. Lena recognized the look instantly. She had worn it once herself, years ago, walking into spaces where she was the only one who looked like her. Without making it obvious, Lena invited her to stand beside her lane. "Focus on your breathing," she said quietly. "The rest follows." The young woman's hands steadied. Across the room, the same wealthy members observed the interaction. They weren't just seeing skill anymore. They were witnessing leadership. When the young woman hit her first clean center shot, her face lit up with disbelief. Lena smiled, because this was the part that mattered, not trophies, not invitations, not reputation, opportunity. Later that evening, the mogul admitted privately, "You changed the tone of this place." Lena glanced around at the room, now more diverse, more welcoming than before. "I didn't change it," she said. "I just showed up." But sometimes, showing up with excellence is enough to make others rethink who belongs. The story of her 10 shots became legend in that circle, but for Lena, it was never about the number. It was about the moment before the first trigger pull, the laughter, the doubt, the quiet dismissal. She had learned long ago that you cannot control how people see you when you first walk into a room, but you can control what happens next. At a charity competition months later, she was invited to speak briefly. The same men who once questioned her ability now waited for her words. She kept it simple. "Talent doesn't ask for permission," she said. "It asks for discipline." The room absorbed that. She didn't mention bias. She didn't recount the mockery. She didn't replay the past, because she understood something deeper. When people witness undeniable excellence, it forces reflection. As the event ended, several members thanked her, not just for her performance, but for the example she set. Lena left quietly, as she always did. Outside, the evening air felt calm. She thought back to that first day. 10 shots, 10 chances, one opportunity to let her work speak louder than assumptions, and it had, not with anger, not with revenge, but with precision, composure, and unshakable confidence. Sometimes the strongest statement isn't spoken at all. Sometimes it echoes from the center of a target, 10 times in a row.